Welcome back to Brigadoon Radio. I'm Brendan, and today we're sitting here with Brook Hazelton, who's the Chairman of WineCredit and was this year's keynote speaker. Brook, you've had a really fascinating career. You've lived all over the world. You've worked in finance, in the luxury goods market. What has been that one consistent thing that was always, with you when you wanted to look at the next adventure that you were going to take, or motivating you as you move through your career?
It's a good question. I think that there are probably a few different factors that have led me to pursue a somewhat less than straightforward path in life. I guess as we get older, we all realize that life doesn't go in a straight line in the first place. But for me, growing up, as you say, in many different environments was one thing that led to a passion and a curiosity for different cultures, languages, professions, and sectors as well. I think I've worked in maybe 7 different industries at this point, or certainly in different segments of industries. A second factor was my own parents. My father always worked for himself. My mother was also always around. So we lived in many different places, not because my dad was transferred by his company or the military, but rather because they were inspired to go and explore a new environment. And they continue to do that. So that's, I think, been something that sparked at an early age in me that desire to seek out the new.
I relate to that very much. People have always said that I have a little bit of this Forrest Gump vibe because I tried so many things because I wanted to know what was the thing that felt the best and what was going to be the profession that let me express myself the most. You worked for Christies for a number of years, and that must have been a fascinating experience just because of the number of things you were exposed to, from paintings that were worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the clientele who all had interesting stories in different walks of life. Very much a cross-discipline of, group of people, kind of like here at Brigadoon. What would you say you learned in that role when it came to walking into a room, knowing that you had to read the room and understand the people in it, because that was part of your job?
Yes, again, I think there's an advantage to growing up with broad exposure to different cultures, different types of people that are motivated in different ways. It was interesting for me to transition from, for example, from a part of finance into this art and luxury world, because the people that are attracted to that world are not necessarily motivated by the same things that people are when they work in a place like finance. In terms of your question of reading the room, I think, of course, like anything else, it's the experience that makes you better. I loved acting when I was a kid, and so coming into the auction world, I naturally gravitated towards the auctions themselves, and it gave me a different level of credibility than just being the Harvard Business School guy that was wearing the suit and sitting in a corner office. It put me on the front lines of the company and gave me a different type of respect by my colleagues. And in terms of reading the room, it's half of the battle of being an auctioneer. The first half is the technical piece. You have to really be able to master the increments. You have to be able to accept bids coming from the online bids, from the in-room bids, from the telephone bids, and from the absentee bids that have been submitted in advance. But then the second piece is really that performance piece, and that's all about getting the pacing right, understanding whether you still have your audience or whether you've lost them. If you go too slowly, you're going to lose your audience, but if you go too quickly, people are going to be upset that they didn't get a chance to get their bid in.
I've always loved the expression, don't chase the bid, let it come to you. And, is that something that is part of that pacing and everything, making sure that you're not pressuring people, but at the same time letting them find their way towards the sale, towards the object?
I think that's true. Like lots of things in life, you can't want it too badly, or it becomes apparent to the party that you're trying to encourage to bid. Certainly, there are lots of tricks of the trade that exist as an auctioneer. I've seen amazing things happen when you tell a gentleman that it's the lady's bid behind them, and that'll keep them going for another several bids. But again, each person is different, and the motivation is different. Sometimes people want the authority, and they're going to respond to the authority. At other times, you have to have a little bit more discretion because people want to be able to feel that they've gotten something out of you. And again, that's the interplay about reading the room and being able to respond to your audience.
What's the most interesting object that ever, came up on the block while you were working at Christie's? Was it something from history? Was it something from art? Christie's obviously works with everything from Paul Revere to Leonardo da Vinci.
Absolutely. It is such a difficult question to answer. I feel like I should have had an hour in advance to prepare for that one. I spoke a little bit last night about this, certainly one of the most fascinating paintings that I've ever had a chance to work on selling which was the Salvator Mundi, painted, we believe, by Leonardo da Vinci, although that's a matter of some dispute. But you know, the asteroids that we used to sell, or the rare furniture chest that was 300 years old and was discovered sitting, being utilized for storing something, and the family thought it was worth $50, and we sold it for $1,000 for $1 million. And these are the sorts of objects and stories that are so fascinating to tell. And every season at Christie's, there are 50 different departments that are conducting auctions, and in each of those auctions, there's going to be at least one or two items that have a fascinating story. In
your new role, WineCredit, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I mentioned I've been in several different industries, but if you try to group them together, they would largely fall into finance on the one hand and luxury on the other. And what I've sought to do is bring those things together for this next chapter in my career. And I've gotten involved with two different activities. The one that has been occupying the most time and I'm most excited about at the moment is a business which I think is a unique business. It is a business which has really expanded the credit market, and it's a specialty lending business to major collectors of wine. We do have clients that have more than $20 million in their personal wine collection as values have risen so much. And you might wonder why somebody would need to borrow or want to borrow that has that much money to invest in wine. But the truth is that people borrow for as many reasons as there are reasons to take out money and reinvest money. In the case of our clients, typically there are liquidity reasons. The high net worth doesn't necessarily correlate with liquidity. And so if you're a real estate developer, if you're trying to go out and start a crazy new business, this is a great way to tap something that ultimately you probably can live without in the worst case scenario.
You know what? If there's a market for it, find a way to sell it. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. More on Brigadoon Radio, coming soon.